Hi everyone, this is Talia here. And before we jump into this new episode, I would like to say something before we start. So, this is a very special episode because it's an interview with two very young and talented teen writers who are only 17 and 18 years old when they published their first book, and they're also from Hong Kong. I actually recorded this and did this like a little interview with them like a year ago. So that's quite some time ago. And a lot has happened in that year since I've met them online. Well, back then, their book wasn't even available to the public yet. And now you can buy their book everywhere. And they also won an award for their first book published. They won the Independent Publisher Book Award for Best First Book in the Young Adult Novel Division. So I'm so proud of them. And in this last year, I always thought about this interview. Like, I always think, oh no, have to publish this at some point because it was such an interesting discussion with these two authors. But then back then I didn't know how to put this awesome discussion into a regular RainbowBird post format. I think it's just not enough to put what we have talked about into just 10 to 20 post slides. So now that we have a podcast, which we also planned this for quite some time, finally I had a chance to present them to you. So in this episode, we have Liana and Kylie, the two young authors for the young adult YA novel Stuck in Her Head. And this is our interview. Please enjoy. I'm Talia, and thank you guys so much for your time for this interview by HKUST RainbowBird. And first of all, congratulations on publishing your young adult novel, Stuck in Her Head. It's going to be released today, right? Like October 24th.
Yeah, it's going to be released today.
Oh my god. I read the pre-read, and then it definitely brought me back to like a lot of memories for me to the days when I was still like a high school student. And I'm very impressed by you two at just like 16, 17 years old and busy with schoolwork and everything. You guys took the time to publish like a bildungsroman that is packed with a lot of social themes that are relevant to many teenagers in Hong Kong, such as mental health, queer relationships, family relationships, like parental expectations and worries for grades in the future, etc. So before we jump into the interview, perhaps you guys can introduce yourselves and your book, Stuck in Her Head.
So I'm Liana. I'm first year at like University of Toronto. So I'm planning to study English literature and cinema studies unless I change my mind. And I love writing. I love telling stories. And what else do I like to do in my free time other than writing? Like I do write now. I work for like comic companies and like film companies in my spare time. And other than that, I'm just pretty chill. I just hang out with my cousins. I play Pokemon, Nintendo, and all sorts of video games. And that's just what I do in my free time when I'm procrastinating.
All right. So, hello, I'm Kylie. I'm a high school senior in California. I moved here about almost 5 years ago from Hong Kong. And writing for me started out as like a hobby when I was in elementary school, and then it just gradually became like this much more serious thing. And somehow I ended up with a book.
this interview, we will divide it into like three parts. The first one will be mainly about your writing process. Very interested to know. And then the characters and the content of your book stuck in your head. And also, since we're HK's USC Rainbow Bird, so of course, some questions on LGBTQ themes in the book. So, first of all, let's talk about the writing process. So, personally, I do know that high school is very hectic and packed with schoolwork. And how did you two manage to take the time to write and publish it?
Um, we actually have a very systematic process. I do think
Mm,
um, we actually so there's if I talk about the beginning stage, so we went through PowerPoints. So we start with the pitching process. So we kind of pitch the some story beats and some characters we would like to include. Then we move on to our PowerPoint, and then we organize story beats. So much more coherent story beats. We fleshed it out, and we just
mm,
try rearranging the slides, and then we start dividing the workload by color coding it, and then
right.
we would set a deadline. Then we would write our separate drafts. So there's two main protagonists because it's easier for us to just kind of split the workload that way, and we thought it relates to the themes of the book. Uh, and that's the reason. And but the thing is that's like for the final version, we edited each other's writing so much. It's very much a collective voice, but for the sake
Mm,
of just easier workload, we decided to divide it up because usually a contemporary YA novel requires at least 50K words. So we knew it was
mm,
just like it's not exactly an even split. It's more like okay, we organize by scenes, we see how long it takes, then we kind of just we regroup, re-edit story beats, and just the process repeats itself. It's very much a grind. It's not that glamorous, honestly, but it is what it is.
Yeah. For me, I was lucky because we had COVID that year, like
mm,
the year that we were drafting the novel. So like schoolwork was just a lot easier for me to handle,
right.
so that I had time to like write a book.
Mm, right. But Kylie, you were living in the US by that time, right? Like, how did you guys coordinate with like time difference and stuff like that?
No. I used to have to wake up really early to call Liana for like during the brainstorming process. Like I would
Mm.
be up at like 7 a.m. like
Whoa. Yeah.
just like calling her, and then I would I would also always used to be late because like for a while I just had like a huge problem with waking up on time, but that after that stage it got a lot easier because
Mm,
we didn't need to be like um online at the same time when we were
right.
drafting, right? We just drafted our individual scenes, and then we got really good at passing edits back and forth, like just using the Google Doc
Mm.
suggestion function. Like we would just edit all over each other's work, and then like I would approve her edits, she would approve mine, and if I didn't agree with the edits, I would comment to be like, "What are you talking about? This is perfectly fine." That kind of stuff.
Mm. Or
I
that's
would
pretty
also
much.
sleep very late. I would stay up very late just so I can call Kylie. It, my sleep schedule was not that good. Kylie wake up really early. I would sleep very late, so I think it kind of equals it out.
Right.
7 a.m. is not that early, to be honest.
On the
Wow.
weekend.
On a weekend, okay, well, but if you're gonna, you need to, it's good. It's good to wake up at that time for school. It's good.
Yeah, have a great sleep schedule. I'm so impressed. Like, you guys sound really organized, you know what you're doing, and it's like such a girl boss moment. And I love how you describe your writing process, like basically just describing all the hard work, all the non-glamorous stuff, and also everything that you took to coordinate everything out. So, how would you actually describe your writing styles? Like, I read it and I think it's like it's a very distinct, like I love how you guys use a lot of the simile and it's really fitting to the whole context. So how will you guys describe your own writing styles? Yeah, in that sense.
Well, I would say it might be like slightly different than mainstream novels you usually
Mm,
see, like young adult mainstream novels, because both of us write like short works as well. Like I write a lot of short stories, Liana writes
right.
both short stories and
Mm,
poetry. So I think we probably do like unconsciously slip some of that into our
hmm.
work. The second thing is that we also try to incorporate a lot of Chinese culture
Mm,
elements. Like sometimes we slip in like an idiom or something like that to,
yeah.
like, spice it up, and also show like the Chinese culture influences on the
Mm,
way the characters think and behave in the novel.
right.
And I kind of want to elaborate on Kylie, just publishing in short works. So we both
Mm,
have a history in publishing in just literary magazines, and they very much requires a bit more of a poetic style. Then and
mm,
it's also just like it really has the tacticals with the themes of the work and so forth. So it's very much it does we do slip more into that style, and that's why I do think it feels a bit more distinct from other YA styles where the prose would usually be more snappy and straightforward. It's just because of
mm,
our background and just publishing in first of all something like writing competitions and just literature magazines, which is what they usually look for. Uh, we do uh, we do also focus on character because while literary magazines I would argue doesn't focus on character as much, we did have character sheets and also just
mm.
we do have something similar to mood boards, so to kind of
Okay.
just flesh out the characters and whatnot.
Wow. I'm so impressed by how passionate you guys are in writing. I used to also write in high school, but I would never like approach. I mostly write in Chinese though, but it was mostly for like competition and stuff. I wouldn't really have the guts to approach like publishing magazines. So I'm really impressed by how far you guys went for. It's so impressive. And yeah, so moving on, maybe like what's the process of publishing it to reach out to agents and publishers? I did see you guys write in an email some challenges you guys faced, and I would love to know more about that.
Oh my God. Me and Kylie immediately smiled because it's like horrendous. It's so painful. It's like writing is like the fun part. That's all you see.
Mm.
Nobody ever likes talking about marketing. So
Right.
for right okay, first of all, you need to make sure the book fits into just the market requirements. It might
Mm.
not seem like fancy. It's like, oh, writing, you gotta let out your inner emotions. No, that's not how this business works. You have to. We already know that we need to meet 50K words, and usually
Mm.
55K is at least the minimum for contemporary young adults. It's much preferred. We were around that. We were 54K, but nearly 55K.
Mm.
So we knew we fit the market requirements, and
Right.
we knew there's going to be at least a niche in the market. It might be like a very small niche, but there is some sort of niche in the market. It's not exactly the most commercial work just because of the themes we tackle.
Mm.
We already knew that when we were publishing it. But we need to draft a query letter. So basically, we have something similar to the blurb you see at the back of the book. What you see there is actually been
Oh.
revised so many times. The one we sent out before, it's similar, but it's much more rougher, but we revised it to the best of our ability then and we also need to write a synopsis, which is
Mm.
basically a 1 to 2 pages summary of what happens in the book. You're not supposed to be fancy here, just telling the reader what happens, because when literary agents usually request stuff, they usually request like, oh, the full manuscript and the synopsis, so they know it's like, okay, what's gonna happen in the story, because they're not enjoying the book for funsies. They're actually like
Mm.
they need to know if there's foreshadowing, if it's like built up very if there are elements built up very well. The query letter is actually not as hard. You do need to personalize it. That's one thing that's usually requires a lot of time. It's not that fun, but you need to do your research on the agent by
Mm.
going on the manuscript wish list to see what they want. And it's like, oh, based on your interest in this type of manuscripts, or maybe they represented something similar, then you need to say like, we think you'd be interested in our work, and you need to bring in some market comparatives, like what is your book similar to. So for example, if you have something like a mystery, you would say, oh, it's maybe similar to Sherlock Holmes, like the vibe or
Mm.
something. um,
Um.
and and we sent out a lot of query letters to publishers and to agents. We did get 6 full manuscript requests, some from like New York Times bestsellers, and one
Mm.
represented like a Nobel Prize winner. So it was wild. But the things is that most of the time it took like 8 months for us to get the book deal. But the first time we got a full manuscript request, which is we start querying in April, then we got it in June. We felt it's like, oh
Mhm.
my God, we get a book deal any day now. I'm so excited. That never happened. We just continued on with life because like, well, well, it is what it is. So we set up like
Right.
calls. We do a like a kind of like a mini competition,
Mhm.
but not really. But we just like see who can query more. And the thing is that you just need to query a lot of people. Rejection is very much for sometimes when you get rejected, you don't even hear back from them. You don't even know you
Mm-hmm.
got rejected. So
Right.
it's very much it's a very tough business to break into. And I feel like some people like the writing process, but they're not exactly know that much about the publishing or the business process. And
Mm-hmm.
you very much need business knowledge to survive in this industry because it is a business at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point romanticizing writing. Like writing is fun, I get it, but it's a lot of work, and it's even more work after you landed a book deal, which you think like,
Right.
oh, after I got a book deal, everything's gonna be fine and dandy. No, it's even worse.
Yeah, that was a pretty comprehensive summary of
Yeah.
what it's like to carry a book.
Yeah, Liana, like that was such a great discussion. Like I think yeah, totally people just look at the writing, but personally I didn't know like publishing requires so much intensive marketing and business knowledge, and I think you nailed it so well like at just a young age. You don't need to get a business degree anymore. This is your project. This is your success story in business. Honestly, I'm so proud, and yeah, congratulations on everything. But also like just a personal like curious question. Have you guys thought about like self-publishing channels? I do know like there's some kind of like Kindle self-publishing and stuff like that. Like, why did you guys decide to reach out to like a publisher and go through all that process?
Yeah, we definitely did think about self-publishing, but I think ultimately we went with traditional because we just thought that this was such an important story and we wanted it to
Yeah.
reach more people. So, like having a publisher gives you a lot more like legitimacy and allows you to access a lot more venues. Like for example, our publisher is getting the book into like bookstores, right?
Yeah.
And they're also handling a lot of the costs. Oh, the cost was also a part of it because like both of us are broke students. We don't
Yeah.
have money to hire a professional cover artist, right? But there was the cost, and there was also like the fact that just the pure like reach of publishers is different
Mhm.
from self-published
Yeah.
authors. Like I know that, for example, for a lot of book events, like bookstore owners might not even consider like talking to or organizing
Right.
with a self-published author. Like for some things, you
Yeah.
need a publisher to like coordinate and
Mm.
communicate for you.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I do think having a publisher allows you to reach your much wider audience and more targeted and gives you more opportunities to share about your work. So, one last question for the writing process. What do you enjoy the most about writing this book, and what do you find as the most challenging?
Everything. Like
For both
I,
for both questions, everything.
I'm not
Okay.
wrong. I'm not wrong.
Okay. Seriously though, favorite part for me was probably like the last few paragraphs, last few lines of like the drafting process, because it was just like so satisfying to tie it all together for like the the one big bang, like just like a
Mhm.
banger last paragraph. And then the most difficult part, yeah, like a lot of it was really difficult. Honestly, I think that like just the forcing yourself to continue working on it, to continue like having the discipline to
Mm. Yeah.
keep on going on, because it was like a whole 3-year project. It's still going on. Like we still have to do like marketing and stuff.
Mm.
And like just having that discipline to continue doing it, I think that was probably the hardest part.
Right.
I agree with that discipline, and it's also just even though we publish in traditional literature magazines, more so to can
Mm.
at least in my perspective is to meet that bar. Because if we can't get accepted in traditional literature magazines or like writing competitions, there's no point pitching to an agent. You
Yeah.
don't even meet that bar against like other younger people. So at least for me, it's about knowing whether we can meet that bar or not. I also think it's also just because at that time we still technically are like nobodies. We didn't even know if the project will get picked up. It was
Mm,
very much a gamble, and because we just it's also like it's very very niche. For one, most stories take place in North America, and
yeah.
also just the book is technically not what people expect it to be. I'm not I because I know this recorded, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but it's just like it's not what people expect it to be. So we knew it's just like okay, it's a bit more unconventional in that sense. So the market we have is already smaller.
Mm,
And we just didn't know whether anybody will publish our story. We think it's publishable, but what do you know? We don't really have anyone before us setting an example. So it's very
mm,
much like a shoot in the dark. And I also think even though we like read a lot of stories and we collab, like it's a good thing having a co-author like who's there with you at every stage of the process, so you know like what's good, what works, what doesn't. It's just still really difficult at the end of the day because you just don't know if it will work out.
mm.
And I think like putting so much effort to a project that you don't even know will work out can just be like such a big thing. And it's also we need to do
Right.
research. Nobody like taught us this. Our parents speak English as a second language. They're not
Mhm.
gonna help us with this.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, for me, it's I think so much about the uncertainty. Like if you,
Mm.
at least in school, if you know if you mastered the skill, then you can apply it, then you probably reach the result you wanted. That's very much not how it works. We got
Right.
rejected a lot, and for a time we just thought like it might be a lost cause, but it got picked up in the end.
That sounds like such a journey. And I mean, it's definitely a huge risk to take. But yeah, that's what youth are all about. We take risk and we just go for it. All right, so let's move on to the second part, which is the characters and the content. And I will not spoil anything. I will just like talk in general terms so people can still expect it. So I read the book and I genuinely love how you guys create characters and protagonists that have so much personality and they're not just, they're just purely good, which is something that I see quite often in some typical YA novels. They're just characters that are like the perfect person and there's no flaws, but I love how you guys create a character that's very human, just like any teens and anyone actually. So I would like to know who is your favorite character to write and why is that person your favorite?
Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Mm.
uh, yeah, Lawrence is such a funny character. I just love him. He's
Absolutely.
like such a meme, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Lawrence is great. He just like I don't, but he just kind of shows up and is just like girl boss his way through the novel. Like, he
Yeah.
honestly, I think he has less than 30 pages of screen time, but he's like winning every moment. He's like winning at life. Honestly, the characters are dealing with so much drama, but he's just
Yeah.
winning at life.
Absolutely,
It's
I get.
great.
Right.
It's so
All right.
funny.
Check out Lawrence, everyone. He's the author's favorite character to write. But do you guys identify with your main characters, or do you guys write characters that are exactly the opposite of you? Because like, especially Liana, because I do know like you also play the piano at a really advanced level. So do you relate to any of the characters while you're writing your novel?
I well, I do relate to it at different levels, but I wouldn't say like they're the same as me. Like I think some of the emotions are the same, but like I said, I especially for the queer community stuff, I did do like a lot of research, and for that, I did like I did interviews. I
Mm,
set up like
yeah.
multiple interviews just to ask about people's experience. So but I think like I do relate to. For example, I struggle a lot with mental illness, and that's just a thing I do, and I just known of a lot of people who do struggle with it. So for me, it was a very big thing for me because I do want to write a story that's because I just see so many stories about like love fixing everything, and I don't want to
Mm.
write that kind of story because it's unrealistic. And I think remember seeing a video about how showing the non-linear journey to healing can be just so impactful. It
Mm.
can be like, so that's a reason why I want to write it. And also, yeah, I do play piano. I still love it. I just don't want to like commit to it anymore. And
Mm.
music is it's very much a love letter to music, at least for
Right.
me. And it's also just I relate to all the characters in just like to different degrees and like in different ways, but at least that's for me. And like I said, it's just a lot of the stuff we tackle in the book are still they're not, I mean, like people are more open towards it, but they're still relatively apathetic toward the topic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just very important for me because I just knew we wouldn't get like a book like this for quite a while, honestly. So that's why I just want to make sure we do it right, we do everything right, and we got like beta readers who are from Hong Kong to
Mm.
read it and stuff like that to make sure the voice is authentic. So
Right.
so yeah, and it's just like I said, I know a lot of people who also went through the same emotions as I
Mm-hmm.
did. So while I do relate to characters, it's just a lot of people my age, or at least in my social circle, relate to some of the same sentiments.
For me, I think I relate I relate more to Naomi, and
Mm.
I think honestly it's probably not because she's that um similar to me. There's some similarities, like, but I think a lot of her struggles, especially about like uncertainty about the future and
Mm.
dealing with expectations, that kind of
Right.
stuff, it's really universal to the teen experience.
Mm.
So I don't think it's just me. I think a lot of teens would relate to a lot of the things that Naomi goes through in the book.
Right. Absolutely. I do see so many different issues and themes being presented through the main characters and their journey in high school. And yeah, regardless of who they are, or maybe even teens not in Hong Kong, I would say they will also kind of have so much they can all emote and relate with your main characters. And I think that's something I really love about your novel. And Liana, just now you mentioned about your interviews to the queer community to make the experience more authentic. And I also saw that in your email, and I was really impressed by the effort that you guys took to, you know, truly make this like a truthful representation. So I would like to know, how was the process like to interview, and how did you incorporate those experiences into your characters?
I well, so okay, so for like a year and a half, that was like my hyper fixation. If I had free time, I was researching about like queer representation. It was
Right,
like it was for the novel. It was fun. It was interesting, but that was like my hyper fixation. And I was just like, I need this for the book. I think I also got like reference. I'm pretty sure I also got references for the types of relationships I want to portray, like how artists use
right,
references. I also got references. Kylie would remember, and it's also just like yeah, I did do interviews with the queer community.
mm,
And I did ask like multiple people, some did answer, some didn't. And it's just
yeah,
more
yeah,
so, at least I think I know it's like, especially in Hong Kong, especially among the younger generation, they aren't as just like it isn't as taboo with the younger generation. I
mm,
just think it's mostly apathy from what I've noticed. We just don't really
right,
talk about it.
yeah.
It's not really a knowledge. We just don't talk about it. And it's well, I do have a friend that's in the queer community that said they received like a hate slur, but it's not
Mm,
common. I wouldn't say like
mm,
that's a very common experience. I would say it's just like it's just not seen. It's very much
mm,
invisible. We don't exactly care about it, but I do think it's also just different from how it manifests like something like North America or like America and something
right.
like that. We aren't that open about it. We just don't care.
Mm,
So it's
yeah.
a bit different. and that's why one of the reasons I want to talk about it in the book is because, for one, it's just easier to write two girls, and also one of the scene won't work if it was a boy. We discussed it. It was like, should we change the gender? And I was like, no, this wouldn't happen. Like if it was with another gender, Asian parents won't allow it. And I was like, so true. So it's like that's why we kept it as like two girls.
Mhm.
But yeah, just and it's also just I was researching like queer representation. I looked through the Wikipedia page of like Hong Kong queer representation. I dug through the rabbit hole of Wikipedia page, and actually one of like I actually for a time I was also interested in like legislation and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of I guess like misconceptions of
Yeah.
it, which I felt was like I wasn't expecting that when I was reading the Wikipedia page, but okay. And
Yep.
it was also just like we were writing it. It was a bit uncertain because I was also researching about just I don't want to say anything too explicit, but it's just like how like same-sex relations were treated somewhere near Hong Kong, and I was
Mhm.
just like, okay, we should tackle this in a very sensitive manner because
Right.
we don't want any bad things happen to the book.
Right.
So it's yeah, and it's for a lot of reasons. The book tackles a lot of things for a lot of reasons. It's not just like the LGBTQ, to be honest. It's a lot of reasons. But
Right.
yeah, it was just a lot of things, and so yeah, that was my 1.5 year hyperfixation. I was so fluent in it. I was so it was like I spoke it like it was a second language. Like for that's how in depth in the research I was. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no.
like I said, I did a lot of research for this.
Right. Yeah, Kylie, what about you? What's your experience to like incorporate in queer relationships into this and your like research experience like?
Yeah, it was probably pretty similar to Leanna. It's probably like
Right.
less intense. I
Right.
let Leanna take a lot of the lead, but like, yeah, it just involved a lot of research to make sure that we were doing it right. A lot of
Yeah.
like sensitivity reads, and just make sure that like we're um, portraying the point of views in
Mm,
like the way that people can relate to.
right. I love that. I mean, I love how much research you guys put, and of course, I think you mentioned so much about like misinformation and also accurate representation, which I think is so important nowadays. So we would like slowly move to our third part of the interview, which is LGBTQ plus themes. So as Rainbow Board advocates for diversity and inclusion, I really appreciate how you guys incorporated queer characters and their protagonist in your story. So I love how you guys incorporate like Emma, one of the main protagonists, being bisexual, and Naomi being aromantic and asexual in this young adult book. And I would say like it's kind of arguably true. Maybe Liana and Kylie, you guys know more because you guys did so much more research in like queer representation. But I would say like bisexual and aro-ace people aren't as well represented as compared to like lesbians and gays. So how important do you guys think it is to include various LGBTQ plus representations in the books for young adults?
I think it's really important because just language is so important. I
Mm,
think in Hong Kong, like a lot of people don't know or don't hear about these things, or don't even have a lot of like young people haven't even heard of these
yeah.
words that they use to describe themselves, and
Hmm.
that's really like a confusing feeling when you don't know like how to describe yourself. So like having the language, it's like a tool that you
Mm,
can use to understand yourself better and
yeah.
be able to accept yourself.
All right. So, okay. Everybody prepared. Okay, the thing okay, so I did, for example, something like aromantic asexual. The reason we actually so I did research on this by reading Loveless by Alice Oseman. I kind of read that as well because it was actually the most famous like example of aromantic asexual representation,
Mm,
and that level of explicitness, because I also was reading about like, oh, implicit, implied versus like explicit representation and its
mm,
pros and cons. But the thing is that like
right.
there's very, at least like at the time we were producing it, it was not as well known. So there's like
Mm,
probably like one major like era ace character in the
yeah.
book that's Alice Ousman is much bigger now, but still it was just like at that time that was the only market comparative. So no one even thought that it was Hannah. It was actually Kylie's suggestion to have like
Mm,
a very explicit like coming out scene. Like
mm,
for
yeah.
us and but we were kind of experimenting differently with it because we didn't know what direction do we take it. Should we have like for example something like Emma come out to her parents? Is that more important? But then we ultimately like disregarded the idea because we felt like
Mm.
there's probably other things we should address first. Um, it's also just like, it's also, I think like there were two different coming out scenes, like one for Emma, one for Naomi. Like I
Yeah.
think for Emma, it's just like it was much more subtle. It was just like an
Mm,
offhand comment. It's just like,
yeah.
but for Naomi, it was like a very much a building up thing.
Yeah.
But and it's just so many in so many YA literature, especially nowadays, I do think diversity somewhat has a negative connotation because it
Mm,
feels so much more like tokenism. And so like it's
yeah.
and it's really such a shame because like diversity, or at least the principle of diversity, is hoping to tell just about people's experiences, and we want them to be treated as like people at the end of the day, instead of like hyper fixated on facets of their identity. And just because, like, for example, we're trying to give the tools, like something like words, to articulate their experiences, but does that mean that would define them forever? No, maybe or maybe not. It doesn't matter. As long as it helps articulate their experience to be understood, then that can be really helpful. And sometimes you could.
Mm,
It's also just so helpful because when you have a representation in fiction, you could just point to that character as like that's me, and
mm,
be like, oh, that's like such a valuable tool and just having people trying to understand you.
yeah.
So we don't. And it's also just like sometimes there's this narrative that we think like, oh, if you have to stick to one lane forever, which is not true. People are always changing, and I think it's also just like adolescence is also just known as a period of change.
Mm,
So we just hope that these will articulate their experiences better. So yeah.
right. Wow. That's awesome. I like how you mentioned about, representation is important as because people will see themselves in these characters and relate to them. And I think that's so important about YA books because I think when I was a teenager, I definitely saw some characters and like, oh, I want to be like them, or wow, we have such similar experiences, and this is my favorite character, and you get so much, from these characters that kind of raised us or shaped us in some way. So, did you guys face any challenges or concerns with publishing a book that includes LGBTQ plus themes, especially publishing in Hong Kong? And you know, did you guys face much, or was it like what you mentioned previously, like a combination of stuff, not just queer themes?
Yeah, sure. I was laughing when I heard it. I was like, oh, so true. Well, so many things.
Right.
In theory, this book shouldn't get published at all. But so it's like, okay, so basically, I mean, like, our publisher is great. But it's also just like we were debating for a time about like the representation of suicide because we
Oh yeah.
addressed it very explicitly in the book.
Yeah.
It's very, but then we were talking about just because teens are much more impressionable. That's not to say they're dumb, but they're much more impressionable. So so that's mean they can be much more influenced by the media they read. So we
Mm,
were talking about how we should represent it. But me and Kylie, we just told them like this wouldn't work if it wasn't explicit. So and then they were like, okay. So and I wrote it. It's funny because I think like we were so much more worried about the LGBTQ aspect,
mm,
but at the end, it's actually worked out better because we realized like there's
mm.
got to be a market for it.
Yeah.
So we, at least in Hong Kong, we knew there's going to be a market for it.
Hmm.
So that wasn't as big a concern, but we were just worried about, okay, what would happen in the future though, just in
Right.
case, because the time we were publishing it, a lot of things were changing very quickly.
Hmm.
So so, like just in the world was changing very quickly. We need to stay on top of it, and we just it might for something like in North America. If we publish this, like for example, something like a North America publisher, they would think it's very tame. But for us, it's like such a big thing because it was like there's nothing
Yeah.
like this before. And the ones that do get published with LGBTQ themes, it's not well known for several reasons. So yeah, we would just we were much more concerned about when writing it, but in the actual process, it was okay.
Yeah, and I like everything you said, and like honestly, I'm really glad that the publishing industry has become so much more accepting
Mm.
of these different perspectives, and also in Hong Kong, like it's getting better,
Right,
getting,
right.
and it's just so nice that like maybe 5, 10 years ago we wouldn't be able to get it published at
Yeah.
all, but now like there is a venue, there is a way.
Mm.
And yeah, also like with the suicide thing as well, because
Yeah.
I remember our publisher being like we don't want this to affect teens mental health. And I
Mm.
remember being like that, like it's basically been proven that like talking about mental health is important to like helping people, not it doesn't harm them in any way. And so I like we debated this with our publisher, and we were like basically like, no, this is important to the plot and also
Right.
important to all of the themes in our book. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
you can't remove it and still have the same book.
Right.
So we did get to keep it, which is great
Mm-hmm.
for representation. Yay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. I think the book not just talks about LGBTQ plus issues, but definitely a lot of mental health stuff and how kind of Emma like struggled through with it and also going through processes and getting professional services and stuff. And I think that's so important, especially in a Hong Kong context and Hong Kong teenagers, because you do see it on the news and it's not really that commonly talked about. The question that I really want to raise is that what do you want to say to those parents that believe that their children shouldn't be exposed to these themes at an early age?
I do understand like where they're coming from because most
Yeah.
parents have their teens' interests like best at heart, and because you're
Yeah.
changing so much, you're so because like especially when you're younger, you're so affected by labels. So that's
Mm.
I can understand where they're coming from. Because I don't want to. Most of the time, we shouldn't villainize a parent because they do in their child's best interests. However, I don't think the book is about that. I do think like. I do think it's just more so just giving words at the end of the
Mm.
day. I don't think
Right.
it's giving these words to articulate their experiences and maybe they find that would be useful to articulate their experience. Maybe they say like, oh, maybe I'm bi for a time, and maybe they just find out they're not. That's
Mm.
completely fine, honestly.
Yeah.
And the book is ultimately about change and just kind of accepting that. And I think it will do more good
Mm.
to have people see themselves and also just realize like, oh, because like you gotta understand, at least when I was growing up in Hong Kong in 2016, the idea of like a guy kissing a guy or like a girl kissing a girl
Mm.
was like mind blowing to like
Yeah.
10-year-old me. It was like, what? What? That's like what? So it was like, and the thing is that like I didn't know that was a thing, and I know like so many of my friends was like they felt so much comfort in having
Mm.
those words and to
Right.
articulate their experience and not to be villainized for it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think I think that's really important because at the end of the day, like I think it's like they're just people, especially if they're
Mm-hmm.
children. Especially if they're children, we just want to give a book that will ultimately like comfort them in a time of
Right.
uncertainty. Because I know so many parents who think like, oh, they're trying to push an agenda nowadays,
Mm.
but the book is not that. I really don't think the book is about that. It's just it, the book is like I said, it's just trying to comfort people and especially younger
Mm.
people in times of uncertainty.
Yeah. I love the whole message to the parents, and I think it's a really great way for teens to, get to know about themselves and also people in the society about issues that are important as presented in your book. And I'm very interested about
Really?
Kylie's experience since like you kind of grew up in the States since you were, I guess, secondary school. How was your experience like about like, getting to know about LGBTQ plus themes in the US?
I think attitudes really are a bit different
Mm.
here, and it's like it was a bit of a culture shock, but in a good way. I think people
Mm.
here are a lot more open about these things, and like there would be like open gay relationships at our
Yeah.
school, which I think is like absolutely wonderful, but
Hmm.
it's not something that I think I would ever have seen in Hong Kong in like
Yeah.
school at least. So I think like that was a pretty like eye-opening experience for me, like immigrating here and
Hmm.
just seeing what it could be like. Like obviously it's definitely not perfect
Yeah.
yet or even close to perfect, but it just goes to show that like we still have a long way to go,
Mm.
and we can always like strive to be more accepting, to be more inclusive to all
Right.
kinds of people.
I love how, Kylie has such a different experience in the States and, has experienced both sides, I would say. And also, yeah, I love that this book is certainly just, you know, a, a portrayal of a situation that's pretty much really happening in among a lot of high school students. So, so is there anything you guys would like to say to these teens out there who might relate to Emma or Naomi's experiences?
Please buy the book.
I was planning to say something inspiring, like, oh, don't let other people say no to your dreams. But yes, please buy the book. Please, please. You're very broke. Dude, oh my God, I don't want to tell about the number we need to break even. Like, the publisher is funding us, but we are also very broke. Please, if you really do want to support HK Talent, then you would buy the book. You would,
Yes.
like, buy multiple copies and distribute them and buy it again. You would buy it so much that we would have to print more books. It's like like buy our merch, buy all the copies of the book, preferably we buy multiple. Leave a review on Amazon to help the
Mhm.
algorithm, but preferably positive and like really good. Like it
Yeah.
really helps the algorithm. If you support HK Talent, you will rate it highly. You rate it higher than 5 stars if you actually care. You rate it like 6 stars. You would like have so many stars you can double for like multiple reviews.
Yes.
I'm just saying, if you actually cared about HK Talent, you would like you would
Okay, okay. Enough emotional manipulation. Uh, in all seriousness, I like to all the teens out there, like I get it's really hard, but like we can get through it. It's gonna be a tough couple of years, but we all have it in us. I
Mhm.
believe in all of us.
to all the teens out there, it gets worse from here.
Yeah, you get used to it though.
You get used to it now. It's just also just don't romanticize the teenage period of your life. It's not any more special. So it's like any year of your life can be your prime. I know we wrote a coming of age narrative, but like still, there's no coming of age here. You can come of age at any time, even if you're like 10 or something.
That's true.
So
Maybe not 10. Okay.
maybe like 10.5, you know? Just raising the bar a
Love
little.
that. Okay, I love the two-part thing.
The
Buy the book
contrast.
and also it will get better. So, do you guys have any, advice that you want to share to aspiring young writers just like you guys?
Never self-reject. So
Mm.
okay, this is like really specific, but the idea is that like you submit to things, right?
Mm.
Whether it's competitions or literary magazines, or if it's a book, you submit to agents and publishers, and like you always get this voice at the back of your head that's like they're never gonna accept this, like I'm never gonna
Mhm.
get in, or whatever it is. The like it's really hard to silence that voice. I think even like really famous authors, they still have that self-doubt, and I think
Mm.
it doesn't really go away. So I think, like, to all of the aspiring writers, listen to that voice and then ignore it. Be like, okay, but like I'm still going to do it anyway. And it
Mm.
becomes like a principle. It becomes a habit. And like if you do it enough times, just sending it out despite not believing that you'll get it at all, like
Mhm.
eventually you will get there.
Right.
I think I just want to add on to what Kylie said. So I aim for 100 rejections per year.
Mm.
Most of the time it's writing. Like most of the time it's writing. Like if you submit stuff, if you keep getting rejected, you're bound to get something accepted just by probability. Like if you keep
Mm.
going to write so much, you're going to improve very quickly. And me and Kylie get more than 100 rejections per year. Like we're published offers, but we still get way more rejections than that per year. And I think it's yeah, just but if you don't have to apply it to a writing context, just go out there and try stuff. Like if you get rejected, I mean, probably worse things can happen, but like at least like it's gonna just be an email, guys. It's
Yeah.
gonna be an email saying like, hey, your writing isn't fit for a magazine. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes you can write some really good stuff and it just won't be a good fit for the magazine.
Mm.
So
Right.
sometimes it's really not like a reflection of your merit. So
Mm.
just go for it, and it's better. And you'll be so surprised by exponential growth. You'll be very surprised. It's habits and stuff like that, but you'll be very surprised by the exponential growth of your writing skills. Oh,
Mm.
and definitely get a writing partner. Get some form of writing group or writing partner for
Right.
feedback.
Mm. Wow, I love the practical advice and all the aspirational one of never giving up and don't be afraid of rejections. So I think that's it. Once again, thank you guys so much for your time for this interview, and congratulations once again on the publishing, and looking forward to seeing it in the bookstores. Yay!
Thank you too. I had a lot of fun talking